What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Hidden Forces with me, Demetri. Today, I speak with Mark Spiegel, managing member and portfolio manager of Stanphyl Capital Partners, a New York-based equity investor. Prior to founding Stanphyl in 2011, Mark spent 6 years as an investment banker financing public companies, having started his career in commercial real estate, where he experienced firsthand the sorts of real-world challenges and opportunities that he credits for much of his later success. Mark, welcome to Hidden Forces.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting having you here, man. I'm actually looking forward to an education and to a good laugh with you. Normally, I have people's quotes, and I have some of yours. They're great, and they're sort of in my little quote list here, which I had with Charley. But the thing I pulled up that I like more, which I think captures who I think you are based on the very limited contact that we've had already, is your Twitter profile, which says, investor, managing member of Stanphyl Capital, wise guy, I buy deep value and short bubbles, and I don't do it quietly.
I have a huge mouth for the size of my fund. There's no question.
I could tell talking to you on the phone, this would be great. Yeah. Also, I want to say also as well for the audience, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. That's the first time that I had a professional sort of thing to say. The last two were like, don't sue me. This is not advice. Because this is like brand new for me.
Yeah, don't sue me either. This is not advice.
This is definitely not advice.
Opinion and facts, though.
Exactly. And we're going to get into that because you have some amazing facts, Mark. Tell me a little bit about your background, though, too, because you're a really interesting guy, and I want the audience to really appreciate what a unique character you are, especially for our particular type of broadcast.
Well, I don't know how interesting I am. You tell my girlfriend that, and she'll think you're kidding. But I'm out of college a long time. I got out of school in '83, spent first 17 years of my professional career in the commercial real estate industry. And I met a lot of companies that way and learned how businesses really run, as opposed to getting out of college and, just going right to some investment bank and working as an analyst and never actually being in the real world. So anyway, 17 years of that, I got a little bit bored, sold the business to my partner, basically taught myself finance, spent a year working for a microcap sort of story stock tech company, learned all of the sort of bullshit press releases. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can curse, man.
All right. We're on an airline here.
Well, you're also, that's true, but I didn't think that's a problem.
All right.
They never told me it was an issue.
Okay.
They never told me it was an issue.
All right. So, I would see like what's going on with the company versus what would be on the press release. And I was like, oh my God, companies don't always tell the truth. I was naive about this stuff. So anyway, did that for a year. And then I decided, okay, now I want to work on Wall Street. And at that point, I'm 42 years old. I have no Wall Street resume at all. But I sent out a lot of resumes, and one young guy running a small investment bank looked at it and he said, hey, you know what? This guy worked with CEOs of companies and helped them find their real estate. And we work with CEOs of companies and help them find their money. That's what investment banking is. His philosophy was, if you can talk to a CEO, you can talk to a CEO. So he hired me on an eat what you kill basis. Got me licensed, 7 and 63. Anyway, so I did some deals, learned a lot about the business, went from there to a larger investment bank, went from there to a still larger investment bank, and then I decided that I really hated raising money from investors, all institutional investors. We didn't deal with any retail investors. But
that is an awful thing to have to do.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I hated doing it for companies that I wouldn't want to invest in myself.
Oh. That makes it more difficult.
And that's when I decided I really would be much happier on the buy side. Now, for people who are listening to this who aren't Wall Street people, you've got the buy side and the sell side. And basically the buy side are institutional investors and the sell side are the investment banks who try to sell them on stocks and deals and whatever. So spent a couple more years investing on my own. I'd put together a really good personal track record investing while I was a banker, and then I was ready to open my own fund, and I did it, and I did that in 2011. So that's how I got here.
And you've been short Tesla for the last 4 years, is that about right?
I've been short Tesla.
And not quite about it.
I've been short Tesla for roughly 4 years. Started with a really tiny position. I've always been a car nut. People say, how do you get attracted to Tesla? Well, I thought it was a fascinating concept. I've loved cars. But then the more I looked at the company, the more I saw that this was actually not a business, and we can get into that later. So I shorted a little bit, and then as the stock got higher and higher, and basically as it got into the upper 200s, which first happened in 2014, I got much bigger in the position. And actually, coincidentally, as you know, the day where go ahead.
Have you shorted just using options, or have you gotten okay?
I'm outright short common stock, and the reason for that is twofold. Number one, it's very cheap to borrow. I mean, other than a few rare instances where stock got called in for corporate events, you know, the borrow rate has typically been something like 1% a year, and the stock trades very actively from 4 a.m. until 8 p.m. New York time. And options don't. Options trade when the options market opens. So it just gives me a lot more flexibility to just outright be short the stock.
Have you tried being short in other ways by buying certain competitors? Have you thought of other ways to go short the company, or are you, I mean, just curious. I'm just trying to understand sort of the way that you are trying to manifest your position as we move forward in this conversation.
Well, basically, every single car maker in the world is about to be a competitor of Tesla. I mean, some of them already are, but the others will be very, very soon. But I haven't gone long any of those, even though a lot of car makers are actually pretty cheap on sort of current metrics. I mean, companies like GM, you know, Daimler, even VW with their problems. But I'm not confident of where we are sort of in the economic cycle, the car buying cycle, and stuff that looks really cheap today on current earnings can get a lot more expensive if, you know, if the economy
What are
takes
price
a
to
dive.
earnings for like a GM or like a Ford?
Cheap. They're like, these are like single digits,
Right.
You know, like high single digits typically.
They're like 8 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
6 to 8.
There's a lot of slowdown, I think, priced in already into some of these big auto stocks. But some of it becomes psychology. I mean, if car sales take a dive, you know, I mean, these stocks can get slammed even lower.
You don't know this because, well, maybe you do, but I was speaking with Charley about this, Charley Grant, who was on the show last week, and that was my first foray and the first foray for the audience through this show into Tesla. And I learned a ton. One of the things I learned in preparing for that interview had to do with the economics of the industry more broadly, and just what a shitty industry it is to be in as a car manufacturer, you know, and like just looking at the advantage, for example, that suppliers have, also really appreciating the global nature of the market. Really, it's a beast. I mean, the amount of logistics and partnerships, business development requirements, all these different sort of components that have nothing to do with the, you know, shiny sort of technological layer, right? Which is so much of what is supporting, I think, at least for the public, any public buyer of Tesla shares who sort of walks in and says, I like it, it's a nice car, I want to buy some shares, is responding to, which is the fact that it's a technology company. It's run by Elon Musk, who appears, by the way, and I don't mean this
just to interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
Tesla is no more of a technology company than any other car maker in the world. In fact, the easiest thing to do is design and build an electric powertrain for a car, because it actually is really simple. The hardest thing to do is to build these cars profitably and in scale. But if you want to talk technology, I would bet, and look, I haven't done the work on this, but I would bet that the electronic control system for a modern, you know, 32-valve, twin turbocharged, emissions compliant engine, along with the alloys that go into building it, is probably has more technology in it than an electric drivetrain.
Well, 100% it has a ton of technology. I don't know if it has more or not, but 100% with you. That I've known for a long time. The amount of technology that's in these cars today is tremendous. And in fact, it made me regret the last car I bought, which had... It's not fun anymore. There's too much technology in it.
Oh, you used to like to work on the cars.
No, I didn't work on the cars, but like the malfunctions were different. Anyway, it's a whole nother thing. But and also getting them repaired is also a different story. But back to this, and I mentioned Elon, and I don't say this glibly, and I also should say Charley made this point when I had him on the show, and I made this point today on Twitter, which I'm using more, by the way. It's not good for my brain.
It's kind of addictive.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't get addicted to it anymore. I used to be super addicted to it, but that's because I used to use it in a more self-flagellating, or not flagellating. What's that term mean? That means something
Deprecating?
else. No, in like, you know, I would indulge in it. I don't do that so much anymore. I don't get as much out of it as I used to, but it is a good promotional tool. But what I did say, and I wanted to make clear, is I have a lot of respect for Elon Musk, man. I mean, the guy is he is a brilliant guy. No, but listen. Straight up, look, separate from those things.
Straight up, I disagree with both of those.
Okay,
things.
fine. So let's put that aside a second. But my point is, I do think the guy is brilliant. The fact that
why do you think he's brilliant?
Well, because I think you have to be brilliant to create a company that can shoot rockets into space. You just
really?
have to.
So let me say something.
Yeah.
So I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
36.
Okay, so in 1969, using basically slide rules,
Sure.
And the most primitive of computers.
Sure.
We safely sent and landed men on the moon. They hit golf balls multiple times. They drove around in little electric carts.
Sure.
And then they blasted off from the moon and came home.
Sure.
Okay. There is probably so much. Look, I'm certainly no rocket scientist, but there is probably so much knowledge out there about how to just launch satellites, which is what Musk is doing. And on the last public financials...
He landed a rocket back on a barge. We didn't have that before. And also, I don't think... I mean, I'm just to say, like, what we did, what our space program did was tremendous, and it was beyond just knowledge. It was a feat of will.
So do you think nobody ever thought of landing a rocket on a barge
Of course
before?
they did.
Like Lockheed Martin, Boeing? Do you think Musk's scientists... Not him, by the way. I mean, he's a college dropout. What I'm saying is that if that was an economical thing to do... other guys would be doing it. The last public financials on SpaceX, which was in a Wall Street Journal article last year, like all of other Musk businesses, it's losing money.
Okay, so hold on a second. Maybe I'm under the impression, quite the opposite, that not having to waste the rocket...
The refurbishing of the
is actually an economic benefit.
Again, we're talking about Tesla.
Now we're moving into SpaceX. But that's a good point because this guy is like, he straddles all these companies and it's relevant.
So
it is relevant.
Apparently you need to carry extra fuel to do that, which apparently reduces your payload. And then refurbishing the rocket, even SpaceX admitted it wasn't saving money yet. They're very sort of cryptic. It's not a public company. And that they were hoping to save money with it in the future. And by the way, the rocket business is one thing, these simple launches. Musk is going to incinerate as many billions in that company as investors are willing to give him, building a satellite constellation for internet in areas that aren't well served, the same areas that are sparsely populated and have no money, by the way, and can never pay for the service.
There's a real estate opportunity right there.
For that, and the rest of it's going to be incinerated on going to Mars. So this guy, you give him money, I guarantee it disappears. Here's how he comes up with his companies, okay? This guy got a stack of 1970s era popular science magazines. You're too young. When I was a kid, I had those. And you go through those covers and you'll see every quote-unquote Elon Musk original idea you've ever seen. Here's how he's a genius. He is a genius at talking people out of their money, okay? As far as I know, he's never run a profitable company. When he ran PayPal, that company was losing all kinds of dough, and they threw him out. Now, apparently they threw him out partially because it was an operating system argument, but it was also losing money. The guy is allergic to profits, but that doesn't stop him, by the way, from flying around the world in a Gulfstream G650ER, which is the largest and nicest private plane you can buy, short of a converted airliner. It doesn't stop him from having a bunch of connected houses in Bel Air, and it doesn't stop him from dating some very hot actresses who would never date him if he wasn't dumping serious cash on them. No, he's been divorced. I think he's divorced 3 times, but twice to the same woman, who were pretty hot too, you know? So, I mean, I don't begrudge him any of that. What I begrudge is the phoniness. Elon is saving the world. The guy's flying to Australia to date that hot chick.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Is that, you know what's surprising, Mark? You're really good at letting me interrupt you. For someone that is so good at talking, you're surprisingly congenial when it comes to interruption. So, is that him? Does he do that, or is that really the media that fawns over him? I feel like it's more the media that fawns over him, and he's willing to accept that he enjoys it, he enjoys playing it, but I don't get from him that same... for example, I was telling Charlie, did you watch this? It sounds like you probably fucking watched everything. Did you see the interview he did with, what's his name, from Interstellar at South by Southwest?
A few minutes of it. Like, I saw some clips from it.
Okay, like, that was really, for me, like, you know, a perfect example, right? Because I forget the guy's name. This was one of the writers for Interstellar. You know, I don't know this guy, and I don't mean to insult him, but he didn't sound like he was particularly sort of a deep thinker, but he was talking about these, quote, deep, you know, topics, like, you know, artificial intelligence and whatever else he was talking about, but like, you know, big, you know, existential risk factors to humanity, right? And he's like posing these questions to Elon, but he was posing them to Elon in sort of like the way of like, Elon, our savior, you know, what of this and what of that? And Elon would sit there and he would do what his Elon thing, where he'd look up and he's sitting there in his flight check, he'd look up, he has his microphone, he's like, well, yeah, and he'll like, you know, talk about these concepts. I don't know though how much of that is that Elon is like, he doesn't seem to me like the most obvious narcissist. I just feel like...
Okay, he's a total narcissist.
Okay, let me just finish my last thought here, though. My point. My point is just outwardly, I've always liked the guy. He seems like a really I mean, I think he has to be brilliant, but I do take your point. And someone who is also a great showman, in fact, a bigger showman, I was saying in last week's episode, than Steve Jobs. I had to go back to Walt Disney and P.T. Barnum to think of a comparable.
100%.
Yeah,
that's his strength.
100% showman, but I feel like he's having a good time. He's enjoying his life.
He's
taking these workshops. Okay, so now let's get to all that, but I just wanted to preface it with that.
I mean, yes, his brilliance is his showmanship, his shtick. Every once in a while, he'll throw in like a self-deprecating line. Oh, I had no idea how hard it was to build cars. And then he'll throw out some total bullshit statistics about how safe autopilot is, claiming it's got a lower accident rate than all the cars in the world, except most of those cars are in China and India, and they're 40 years old, right? If you look at the accident rate versus like other new luxury cars with 14 airbags or whatever they have, I mean,
do they have 14
and by the way,
now?
And I can give you so many examples of him citing misleading statistics and outright lying. I mean, he was on a conference call once, just a couple of years ago, and he's like, Tesla doesn't discount its cars for anybody. Even my own mother, she pays full retail. Meanwhile, while he was saying it...
That's like a joke. He didn't really say his mother, did he?
I don't know. He might have.
That's not really
He
true.
might have. Meanwhile, while
I give my mother this. I give my mother better. I give you a better present than my mother.
It was an Odd Couple episode years ago for a garage spot in New York. It was, and the guy goes, "You'll be back. My mother came back." Anyway, so back to the point. So he's saying Tesla doesn't discount its cars for anybody. Meanwhile, while he's saying it, you could go on the website, see all kinds of brand new, never used inventory cars with 5-figure discounts, get $1,000 discount referral program. The guy, it's just like he will outright lie, shamelessly.
No, I believe that.
And the weird thing is, to me, you say this to people, but
that's the problem. It's the people. It's everyone else that's sort of like, it's the people in the stands in the Coliseum cheering.
When the equity in this company, the stock, goes to zero, which it will, because the debt will bury this company and it's not a viable business. These people are going to look themselves in the mirror and they're going to deserve everything they get.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Tesla is a religion.
Yeah,
okay?
for sure.
And so,
you can't hold that. Yeah,
with most companies, there's a long case and a short case, and you and I could sit across this table from each other and talk about this margin and this competition and that private. I'm arguing with religion with these people.
No, for sure. And it's not just Tesla. This is a phenomenon across the board for a lot of companies and a lot of in politics, for example.
Politics for sure, but Tesla is the most extreme, case of this I've ever seen.
So
in my
let's
life.
get into this. So, first of all, I really wanted to do this with you because I just, I know you're a funny guy, so I wanted to kind of start off the show sort of.
I'm not trying to be funny.
No, you are funny. So before we start, tell me, you've done stand-up comedy, and you said the reason that you didn't really continue it is because you didn't like using old material. You like kind of doing new material, but that wasn't really a profitable way to run a comedy business, which is.
Well, it wasn't a matter of a business. I mean, when I had my real estate company, at one point, I thought it'd be fun to try stand-up. So, part-time at night when I sell the company. I went and I started with open mics and, did that stuff. And after a couple of years, I got better at it. And they had open auditions at the comic strip, which maybe they still do once a month. And I went there and I passed the audition and then got to audition for the guy who ran the club, who died a few years ago, this guy, Lucian. And I killed, both times. And I could have gone on with this. Lucian was he wasn't quite ready.
You totally could. I could see it.
But the thing about stand-up is, you got to have a great 15 or 20 minutes, right? And the fun part to me was actually coming up with the joke in the first place and doing it for the first time and having it work. And that happens with, I don't know, if you're lucky, 1 out of every 5 jokes that you write, and then the other 4 are nonsense. And that's how you put your act together. You take the good joke that worked, but then you're just repeating the same thing over and over. It wasn't creative to me. I didn't enjoy it. Yeah.
So as we begin now to delve into the facts here, as you mentioned at the top, I'll say one of the things about you, doing this job, I have the privilege to speak with so many interesting, smart, quirky, different types of people. The one thing I noticed about you right at the top when we spoke on the phone before this interview is you seem like a guy with a very, very, very good bullshit detector. It would be hard to pass one by you.
Well,
No, is that not right? Would you not take that to be true?
I haven't been fooled in a while. I've paid my tuition. Let me put it that way. Well, so I'd say yes. I think I've done. But the thing is,
you're definitely skewed towards skepticism as a person.
Well, I mean,
is that not right?
I am skewed towards skepticism. That's 100% true. And the thing about Tesla is it's a public company. I mean, we're sitting here across from each other. I have on my iPad, the Q4 earnings report, right? It is what it is.
So let's talk about
it's numbers, and in this day and age when everything is recorded everywhere, I mean, I can fact check all kinds of stuff somebody says.
You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes.
You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes. This day today, Tesla put out this press release, we're not going to need to raise any money. Well, Elon Musk first said we'll never need to raise any more money in 2012.
That's total bullshit. So that is pure bullshit.
But
that
this
is
guy
bullshit. If you
spews
look at
pure bullshit.
So that's the thing. So putting aside Elon Musk, because a lot of people bullshit, and actually we live in an age where that's happening more and more people are getting away with it. So let's put that aside. Let's actually look at the facts, because what I said on the show last week to Charlie was that whenever I look at a company or I look at any situation, I try to see both sides of it. And if I find myself, let's say, taking, in this case, the bear position, I try to understand how the bulls rationalize their position in a way that makes sense, where I could say to myself, okay, I could see how that would be a rational sort of way to get there, but you have to be willing to live with these assumptions, and I'm simply not willing to live with these assumptions. What I don't see is the rational argument with whatever assumptions you like baked in. I don't see that in Tesla's case.
There's
it
none.
is so
It's
obviously
religion.
Yeah. So let's talk about
Elon is great. Elon is God. He's a genius.
What are your sort of, let's start top and go down. I mean, because I have a bunch of them sort of for me personally when I looked at it. One of them is the onslaught of competition that's coming, but also the debt burden, the interest payments on the cars, the loss of the subsidy, the manufacturing hell, the fact that the Model 3 is, I mean, the performance is so dismal that now anything that beats the horrid expectations elicits sort of a market rally. So, but let's go through those. I want to talk about this for the audience. Like, how would you express your dissatisfaction with this company beyond the qualitative assaults that we experienced in the first 20 minutes?
I can distill this into 3 primary points, and then we can go a little bit more into the weeds, okay? Point number 1, Tesla has absolutely no moat, okay? It has no unique proprietary technology. In fact, in some cases, for instance, its battery pack design, it now trails the leading edge stuff coming out.
It also has no patents in autonomous driving.
Autonomous driving is a joke at Tesla. Yeah. I mean that if you look at everybody quit that program, they're a disaster. Who's the big consulting firm just rated like 18 different companies on autonomous driving? I forget the firm, and Tesla came out last, literally 18th. It's not even worth talking about. I mean, we can go as much into the weeds as you want on it. So number 1, they're technology laggards at this point, pretty much, in everything they do, and I can get as specific as you want. Number 2, they basically had an open window with absolutely no competition in luxury EVs for years, right? And in fact, until last year, they had no competition in EVs with a range of 200 miles or more. All they did was lose more and more money each time. In other words, they had a monopoly in their niche, and they couldn't make it profitable. But now there are like 100 long-range EVs coming into the market over the next, 3 or 4 years. On the luxury end, they reported this morning their Q1 auto sales, not in terms of revenue, in terms of unit sales. The Model S and X, which are their higher margin products, even though they still lose money on an EBIT basis on those, but those numbers were down double-digit percentages, okay, both sequentially, which means from last quarter, and year over year from the same quarter last year, okay? And that's even before the luxury EVs arrive. Now, Jaguar has a fantastic luxury EV. It's going to be in the showrooms this summer, okay? Audi has a great electric SUV, all-electric SUV. It's going to be in showrooms this fall, late fall into winter. Mercedes has its electric SUV, and it's going to be in showrooms.
Is that going to look that way? Because it looks dope. It looks gorgeous.
They all look good.
Well, the Jaguar looks gorgeous, and it's $10,000 less than the Model 3.
Well, no, not Model 3.
But then the Model X 100D?
No. It's $10,000 less than the X75.
The 75.
Now, in fairness, it's smaller than the X75, but we'll get into that in one second.
If I was comparing it to the Model 3, I thought okay, go ahead.
And then you've got Porsche coming out,
right.
With its fantastic
I'm not crazy about their looking.
The Mission E.
You like that one?
I love it.
It's not my thing.
I love it. Anyway, that's out next year. So back to your point. So the Jaguar is a little bit smaller than the Model X. It's not a 3-row thing, right. Okay? It's $10,000. But the thing is, a lot of people who wanted an all-electric SUV picked the Model X because it was the only one and would actually prefer something that's easier to park, right? Not to mention has a much nicer interior, which the Jaguar has. So between that and the Audi SUV, which is bigger, the Audi SUV is not 3 rows, but it's a big 2-row SUV.
It's a great car.
The one that's coming out. And then the Mercedes EQC, which is out
amazing.
early next year. I mean, these are going to destroy Tesla sales. But the point I'm trying to make is they're already down double digits, the S and X. And those are the cars that theoretically would have some margin to them, even though they don't. What Tesla's brilliance is, it's brilliance for morons, is getting morons to focus on what they want the morons to focus on, not what the morons should be focused. And by morons, I mean people who own the stock. Not what they should be focusing on, okay? So Tesla has this whole thing about Model 3 production. Now, as it turns out, it's been total crap. It's been a disaster. The quality has been horrible.
It's been a catastrophe.
But they get, we had this burst production of 2,000 in the last week of the quarter. Now, without going too far into the weeds, let's just point out that to do that, they ran the plant for 7 days, and they pulled everybody off the assembly line for the S and X to hand-build extra Model 3s.
Sounds like a nightmare, man.
So the real production rate of the Model 3 even now is, I don't know, maybe 1,000 a week or something, maybe less. That's not the point. The point is that car will never make money, okay?
Yeah.
If you look at with Model S and X, how much money they lose, and that's an average selling price of $100,000, they say the Model 3 will have an ASP of $43,000. Even now, they have negative margins on the Model 3 at an ASP of over $50,000.
What are the losses per unit?
So
isn't it like 23 or 16,000? What is it? Some huge number.
So in Q4, which is the most recent quarter for which we have financials, if you look at the GAAP loss for the whole company, okay, and you take away the sale of California ZEV credits, zero emission vehicle credits, which is not a sustainable way to run the business. That was sort of a one-time injection. Those are going to go down in value as more and more companies have their own electric cars. They won't have to buy these ZEV credits from Tesla.
These are the credits that other companies have to buy in order to offset.
To sell cars that actually make money.
Right, in order to meet regulations.
Exactly. So anyway, if you take the total loss, GAAP loss from Tesla, and divide it by the number of cars, they lost over $28,000 for every car they sold.
What if you don't
in
take
Q4?
Those out, though?
Take the ZEV credits out?
Yeah, what if you don't take them out? I understand that eventually they're going to have to...
I think they lost 24,000 or something like that.
Okay, so that's huge, exactly.
It's
so
huge.
That's what I remember.
Now, in fairness, some of those losses encompass the energy company. People talk about,
talking about solar. Solar City.
Well, there's Solar City, but people say, Tesla's really a battery company, right? Tesla's batteries are made by Panasonic.
Right.
Okay, Tesla buys the batteries and packages them.
And they presented Panasonic as a partner, but in fact, Panasonic is no partner whatsoever.
Not a partner.
They're working out a deal with some other
first of all, Panasonic's not a partner. Panasonic installed its machines in that big boondoggle that they call a gigafactory in the middle of effing nowhere in Nevada. In exchange for doing it, Tesla gave Panasonic a guaranteed amount of purchase that it would do. So these machines are actually capitalized leases on Tesla's balance sheet. Point being that Panasonic's like, give us the money and we'll put the machines in.
So they're on the hook to Panasonic now too.
Yeah, they're on the hook to Panasonic. But the other thing is, Tesla bid on this big battery project in Australia, which you probably heard about, which they installed, okay? In order to do that project, Tesla had to buy, probably millions of batteries from Samsung and package them and install them. Now, Samsung has its own energy storage business. Samsung is all over the world bidding on projects. Samsung looked at how much Tesla underbid on that project. I guarantee Tesla lost money on that project. And Samsung said, whoa, if these idiots are going to do it for that little, we'll just sell them the batteries and let them sell them for less than we're charging them for the batteries. That's essentially what happened there.
I want to just interject here, and I want you to continue, Mark, because I want to make an edit to my statement about Elon Musk being brilliant. There are all ways that someone can be brilliant. He clearly is a horrific businessman. And I think that the thing that stands out for me when I read through this stuff, and it's just exacerbated by listening to you, and I want to say it for our audience, is I think the big overarching problem here is that anyone with sort of a strategic mind is seeing at the most sort of elementary blunders of strategy that this company has made in the last number of years. They moved into this mass car production market, and what's manifested is a disaster, an epic disaster that, the most sort of basic strategic thinker could have avoided. Does that resonate with you? Because for me, looking at it, like, they put themselves in such a horrific position where even if everything goes right, they still can't come out on top.
It's all about the stock pump. Musk has borrowed, I don't know, probably around $1 billion or close to that. The last report was high hundreds of millions against his Tesla stock. He flies around the world. He lives an incredible...
You think this is that bad? I mean, like, there are people that might agree with you. Like, I mean, I mentioned that Jim Chanos has compared the company to Enron, but I didn't hear him compare... Who was the guy with an S? What was the guy's name at Enron?
Skilling?
Skilling. You think he's like Skilling?
I don't think... I certainly have absolutely zero evidence that Tesla is making up the bottom line number. I mean, it's so horrendous.
Right.
It's so horrendous that...
They're not making up the number.
No one would make that number up. But what Tesla does is they do very deceptive and misleading things in the financials. For instance, okay, Tesla's service and used car division in the last quarter, which is the Q4, which is the last one we have as of the time of this, podcast, had a massive negative gross margin, okay? Who loses money selling used cars and doing automotive service? Nobody. You know why they do? Because they under-reserve for warranty costs in the new cars to have an artificially high gross margin, and they're overpaying for trade-ins in order to get people to buy the new car. And then when they have to sell those used cars at a loss, net of all expenses involved, they bury that in the automotive service line to make the gross margin line on the car look better. I'll give you another example. The entire automotive industry counts against gross margin engineering costs, and a chunk of some do all R&D, some do a chunk of R&D, because basically you've got a car model, you've got to re-engineer it every 6 years, and that cost is part of the cost of goods sold, or in Tesla's case, cost of automobiles. They don't do that. They put all of that stuff below the gross margin line in order to have an artificially high gross margin line. And then they compare themselves to other car companies and say, look at how great our gross margins, which, by the way, is now awful. I'll give you one more point, which is every other car manufacturer in the world, major manufacturer, they have franchise dealers, okay? So if you've got a Mercedes S-Class with a $100,000 sticker, Mercedes sells it to its dealer for $90,000, right? And then doesn't have the cost of operating the dealerships. That's all on its stickers. But it just took a 10% hit to gross margin, right? Tesla has its own dealerships, okay? Tesla doesn't have to take that hit on gross margin. Instead, it loses all kinds of money on the SG&A line operating its dealerships. Point being is this. Last quarter, Tesla automotive sales, if you exclude those ZEV credits, had around a 13-point-something% gross margin under its own, total bullshit definition of gross margin. If Tesla's had to calculate gross margin the way the rest of the auto companies did, so you could actually do an apples-to-apples comparison, Tesla would have had a negative gross margin on its cars, okay? But, you talk to a Teslarian, or a Teslemming, as I call these people, and they'll say, oh, they have the highest gross margins in the world. No, they don't. Most of these people don't even know how to read a financial statement, frankly. And the ones who do don't want to look, okay? And then
I wouldn't want to look at these financial statements either if I were them.
Right, exactly. And there are some mutual funds who I think are basically momentum investors who are like, as long as it's going up, we'll own it. We're not going to worry about, that stuff. So
it's similar to the culture. Bears has some similarities to the crypto community culture. And in fact, generally speaking, and I wonder about what you think about this, because it's one thing I want to ask you about, which is I think that Tesla in some ways is if not the, certainly a icon, and Elon certainly is, as well as a person. He personifies this bull market in technology-related stocks and sort of this tech bull market more generally. And I think there is this cultural...
By the way, except to repeat what I said earlier, Tesla is not a tech company. It's
of course,
a car
but
maker.
it's located in Silicon Valley.
I defy you to show me a single tech company with a 13% gross margin.
No, I hear that. So technically speaking, yes, but I agree with that, and I agree with everything we discussed earlier about the lack of sort of proprietary technology in the car, and all these other cars are technological, blah blah blah. Sure, yeah, but that's irrelevant, right? In terms of like what the public feels and thinks, and how.
Well, it's irrelevant until it isn't.
Well, right. So that's not my point. My point is that we've been in a bull market now for years, and there is, I think, something unique about this market that wasn't true in the last. I wouldn't even call the last one a bull market. It was a credit-fueled bubble, and
that's what this one is too, by the way.
Yeah, it is. But we're actually, but that money's going into investments as opposed to going into housing prices to refuel the bubble. So it's different. We had a bubble in the late '90s as well, but
it's actually not going into investments. First of all, housing prices I think are probably back up to where they were. But more importantly, you've got ridiculous multiples on stocks and they're borrowing money to buy back stock.
I got you. No, 100%.
This
so
isn't
that
going
there's
into
happening
investment either.
There is stock.
Or you've got the complete incineration of capital, like the Teslas of the world have done.
Yeah, you're 100% right that in the stock buybacks things is a huge problem, and in that sense, it is sort of like the equity extraction of the mortgage market and sort of piling on and leveraging and buying more homes. But I just think that was even worse from a standpoint of like actual like
Stocks
investment
are more,
capital.
Well, if we're talking about the stock market, stocks are more expensive now than they were in 2007 by just about any multiple possible.
Right. But I think there is this sort of euphoria for sure, but what I think we're seeing in this time around, this was my point, it's more similar to the late 90s, and I think the vitriol that accompanied the 2008 collapse, the sort of seething hatred for Wall Street, I think that's something that we're not at 2008 in terms of the same types of potential feelings, but I think we're making progress towards that. And I think the public backlash against Silicon Valley and tech-related stocks and companies and cryptocurrencies, I think all those things are on the horizon. And I think one of the blowbacks is going to be regulation. We've talked about that for cryptocurrencies. I think in terms of one of the sort of bearish cases you can make for autonomous driving is not the technology itself, but the backlash that could accompany stories like the recent crash of that Tesla vehicle and the sort of the person that got hit by an Uber vehicle. It's not the statistics, it's not the facts. Let's put those aside. It's just I think there will be a backlash and government will overregulate, and I think, that's going to be part of the story that's going to happen after there's going to be a correction or a crash or whatever you want to call it, and we may have already begun that process. Do you think that the top was made in January and that we're going to be bouncing until we start making new lows in financial markets? Well, when I say do you think, do you think it's a higher probability?
Okay, I'm positioned for that. Okay, obviously calling market tops is hard.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm positioned for that. I think that we've seen the best in terms of the economy in the world. There's actually a lot of liquidity withdrawal that's about to happen from the central banks. The Fed is already withdrawing tens of billions a month. Yeah. Europe's been printing 30 billion euros a month, but that ends actually in September. And they may extend it with some limited amount after that, but not a lot after that. And that's what's been driving this stuff. I mean, the Bank of Japan is still printing a massive amount of yen, frankly. And I've been short the yen, and it's done nothing. And I have no idea why, but I think eventually it will. But that's a whole different story. Yeah. But as interest rates go up, this whole thing was fueled by money printing, low interest rates, and just general liquidity. As that goes away, you can't sustain these kind of asset prices.
Right.
It's interesting, by the way, you talk about the backlash against Silicon Valley. So I'm not on Facebook, but certainly I use Google services all the time. No, I registered my name on it just so I'd have it, so someone else couldn't do it.
It's such a waste. It's such a shitty platform. It really is. It's pure shit. I've been using it I've been using it for the show out of sort of pushed into doing it by someone with good intentions, and I've wasted a lot of time creating content for Facebook where ultimately no one really who's going to listen to the show cares or goes on Facebook and spends much time. I found that, now that I started using Twitter a bit more, my audience is on Twitter. It's just such a time suck to sort of tweet and stuff like that on Twitter. Yeah. And it sort of goes against kind of the more sort of thoughtful approach that I want to take with the show as opposed to the gunslinging sort of witty comment stuff that does well on Twitter. But anyway, so you're not really on Facebook.
No, but what I was going to say was, I'm against this kind of regulation, even though I'm not on Facebook. But Google, I use all the Google services. Okay, I know what Google's doing. I know they're pulling keywords out of my stuff and hopefully anonymously selling it to advertisers. Listen, what I say to people is that you're getting all these services for free. Okay, if you don't want people scanning your stuff to anonymously sell you AdWords or whatever the hell they do, you know what? Go start a business where you charge people $100 a year. Because you got to operate all those servers and everything. You're getting this for free. You don't like it, leave.
You use all their cloud services, like all their.
I do use Google Drive, so I pay a little bit more because I.
So you don't have anything locally. You don't use like Microsoft Word. Do you use like MS Office?
No, actually, I do use. I subscribe to Microsoft's Office Suite for $99 a year.
But you have
for 5
save
computers.
it locally. You don't have it stored on the cloud.
Correct. It's local, and then I store my documents on Google Drive.
The ones that you don't worry about. But I know people that just are fully plugged into the cloud, and in general, I really don't like Google stuff. In fact, it's interesting. Now we're getting way off topic, but I got really bullied into using Google for the company for a bunch of things, and now I've pushed back. I've taken control back, and I.
So what do you use instead?
I have Outlook. I use Outlook for my emails.
Oh,
I have
that's
everything
fine.
saved. Yeah, so I mean, I don't like, but that's a whole other thing. But I don't feel comfortable generally with where privacy has gone.
But that's fine. I totally respect
Sure.
that. I totally respect everybody doing that. But then you have to pay for a
Yeah,
service.
for sure you have to pay for it, 100%.
You
And I
know?
think that's that's part of the argument that I've made for the audience on this show. You cannot get good content anymore from companies that rely, or publishers that rely on advertising. You will get pure shit. And the ones that have made a bargain with the devil and Facebook, they're getting pure crap.
I've noticed more and more paywalls going up.
We're not going to do subscription services for the podcast. That's everything that's free people get now is going to be free. But we're going to make stuff that's valuable and meaningful and educational for people available, and they'll be able to pay for it at a very reasonable cost. That will be worth
they shouldn't judge us by me.
What do you mean?
You know, when you say valuable and
This is valuable.
stuff.
Listen, this is this show is super valuable, and you know we need to have episodes like this sometimes where we have smart people who are also funny and have done stand-up. You're my first stand-up comedian, but you ever watch comedians in cars getting coffee?
Yeah, you know, I have to tell you, what actually got me to do comedy was seeing Seinfeld.
Really?
And how successful it was
Live
in 90.
or the show?
No, the show.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd see some of it, and I'd be like, you know, that guy's kind of funny, but he's not that funny, and he's making all that money. I said, I could do that. You know, now
was
as
a
it turns
horrible
out,
actor.
it's what's that?
He was a horrible actor.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's obviously it's harder to do it than you
yeah.
think, and he's, you know, but he's a funny guy, and I like him,
funny
and I
guy.
like that show. You know,
Yeah,
he's got
yeah.
some. I mean, I'm a total car guy, so he's
Have you
got some
seen
great
the one?
cars on
So
there.
I haven't really watched much of them, but I was having my engineer watch one that I saw last night that was just I literally pissed myself. It was so funny. Alec Baldwin. Have you seen that one?
No, is he on Netflix now? That because I don't have Netflix.
Yeah, well, the comedian in cars getting coffee is on Netflix.
That's a Netflix. I don't have
Yeah,
Netflix,
so
I used to watch
okay.
it. I used to watch it on Crackle or
Oh,
whatever.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
That. What's Crackle?
That was like a comedy thing on YouTube.
Oh, that's interesting.
Whoever had it, I think it was.
So
funny,
you know, like that guy that like we go. Did you grew up in New York, right?
Yeah.
Where'd you
well,
grow up?
I grew up in Jersey, and then I moved into the.
You,
into the city
ever
after
go like
college.
out when you're younger? You went out like maybe you still do it, but probably not many people do it with. But you go out to like a club or something, and you know you're wasted. It's the end of the night. It's like 4 or 5 a.m. Later, you go to a diner. You're with your bunch of buddies.
Many times.
Yeah.
But not in many years.
You're with,
but many times.
Yeah, you're with a bunch of buddies, and you're sitting at a table, and there's that guy who's in the group who's always that guy. He's not in every group because he's a rare find. Like that he can engage everyone and you're all choking on your food. You can't stop laughing.
I'll tell you what the most fun was.
Maybe that was you.
No, it was. I'll tell you.
But that was Alec Baldwin in this.
He was that good?
2-8. Oh my God, man! Like he was that guy. He was just that guy. That guy that
Really?
you can't stop. Yeah, he was just, and he had the best impressions. He did this great Jack Nicholson impression, and he did all these interesting. And he would just talk, and his flow was incredible.
Alec Baldwin is an amazingly talented actor.
Amazingly talented.
The 7 minutes or whatever it was that he did in Glengarry Glen Ross. You know the scene
Oh,
I'm
of
talking about, right?
course, of course.
That
He's
could
a
be
genius.
that could be the single greatest 7 dramatic minutes, you know, of any sort of
He's
staged
incredible.
play ever. I mean, fantastic. But you know, the guy's career kind of
Yeah, because I think
went to shit. I mean, he was a leading man in Hollywood,
Yeah.
and then I guess it became difficult. And you know, the thing
he's apparently very difficult to work with.
but let me tell you what I can do with Alec
He's
Baldwin.
an angry man.
Yeah, right. No, but let me tell you what I can do with him. I can have total respect for his talent, which I do. He's incredibly talented, and separate that from his total libtardism, which he suffers from.
Sure,
right?
for 100%.
And, you know, it's like people tell me, like, well, what do you think of Trump? Okay, now, you know, Trump is I think Trump is a buffoon. He's a serial liar. He's a jerk. He's a lot like
He
Elon
should run
Musk.
Tesla.
He's got a lot of parallels to Elon Musk, actually. I mean, seriously, he does in terms of the narcissistic personality of any of it. But
I don't. I mean,
But-
yeah, but I mean,
that's a whole other-
you're
but-
really taking a whack at Elon.
Well, there are a lot
with
of
that
interesting
comparison.
parallels there. But Elon lashes out at the media, you know, when they ask legitimate questions. Very
Do you
similar.
think he's having a breakdown? In all seriousness,
Maybe.
I think he seems. No. In all seriousness,
Do I sound excited when I say that? Maybe.
No, but
I don't mean it to sound,
you know, I don't know. Our audience doesn't know this. Here's that picture of him that he took a fake picture of himself on April Fool's and he put a sign bankrupt on the end of a car. Not funny at all. In all seriousness, not funny at all. Like I saw that, and he put out a tweet that Tesla's going bankrupt. I just thought, you know, that's scary that you would think that that's appropriate. In all seriousness, right now,
Yeah,
like,
no,
this is
he's
that's
admitted
super
to being,
scary, man.
He's admitted to either being, bipolar or manic depressive. But let me just to finish my
So
point.
he may be having a breakdown. In all seriousness, because in the condition that the company is in and the seriousness of his situation, he's not approaching it with the same level of seriousness. Right?
What's funny is
and he deleted the Facebook account. By the way, that might be part of the whole bender.
What's funny is a lot of people own Tesla because of Elon. One of the biggest reasons I'm short.
That's a bad
One of the biggest reasons I'm short Tesla is because of Elon. But I just want to finish on Trump because the people hearing this, but what I was saying was, I actually like, not all of them, but I like a fair number of the guy's policies, even though I think the guy is a jerk and a liar and a buffoon and everything else.
Yeah.
So, all of my relatives are total, like, ultra-liberal Jews from New York City, right? And, I'm like anathema even saying that. So, we'll sit down, so they'll go like, what do you think of Trump? And I'll start off
They're
with...
like, what's his name from Curb Your Enthusiasm, right?
I'll start off, yeah.
He's like, you voted for Bush?
Larry David.
She voted for Bush!
Larry David is a genius. So if I were doing comedy today still, and I saw Larry David, I would just quit.
I can't watch him, man.
It's like,
I found him funny for like a couple episodes.
Some people can't take him. To me,
I have another friend, a really good friend who's Jewish and like Jewish, grew up in Brooklyn, and he goes, I can't watch that guy. I grew up with those guys. I can't watch that guy.
That's very funny.
I can't watch
him. But what I was going to say, I'll start off with my relatives, and I'll start off, about what, I think Trump's a liar and a jerk, and, blah, blah, and they're like nodding their head like, oh, great. And then I'll say, but... I actually like some of the guy's policies, and that they all have TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. They can't separate the person from the policies.
Yeah,
but with Alec Baldwin, just to finish full circle,
no.
I can separate the person from the talent, and he's a very talented guy.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that because Jerry Seinfeld was on Stephen Colbert some months ago, and Stephen Colbert asked him, which I thought was just a weird question. He's like, now that these things with Louis C.K. came out, can you separate that from and Seinfeld's like, or maybe it was Bill Cosby he was talking about, I forget what he said. I don't think it was Bill Cosby, I think it was Louis C.K. And he said, yeah, I can separate it. And then he's like, I can't. He's like, you can't separate it? He's like, nah, I can't. He's like, and then like you can imagine the Seinfeld.
Who said he can't?
So Colbert said he
Colbert
can't separate. And
right.
Seinfeld, you could see like was becoming really disgusted. He's like,
yeah,
you can't separate it?
Well, Seinfeld, to his credit, said he can't even do good comedy
no,
anymore.
A lot of people saying that.
This whole
and
PC stuff.
But it is true, man. It's totally true. And that's true.
Admire the art, not the artist. That's an old
expression. It truly is,
right?
and I'm not just saying this, it truly is true of both the left and the right. You and I experience it for people on the left because we live in New York, and it is a very leftist city. So we experience that from the left. There are other parts of the country that I'm sure people experience it from the right, and each sort of side has its characteristic, but it's a sheepish, sort of ideologically driven mentality, and it's horrible because it's genuinely dividing people, even within families, people getting into arguments, right? Like we've all experienced that, and it's the reason why I don't talk about politics on the program, because I find that the task of trying to approach the subject intelligently is impossible. I'm going to have Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, a fantastic book, a book I read over a couple summers ago. He's going to come on the program sometime in the early summer, I think, because he has a book coming out that he's been working feverishly on, and he wasn't doing any press except for like one thing he did with Mark Andreessen or something at TED. But he approaches it in such an intellectual way, talking about sort of our feelings of disgust and morality and everything. I would do a show like that, but in general, I don't touch it because I really don't want to, get into a situation where I'm being criticized by the left, because it is religious, because people are lemmings and they are sort of just so focused on sort of the moral aspects and all these sort of, Pavlovian reaction.
My late...
By the way, this shows you how little respect we obviously have for Elon and Tesla, because we've completely... This show is going to be titled... I have the working title... By the way, I have the working title here. This is horrible. This is hard. I have the working title here for the show. It's called Tesla and the Cult of Elon Musk. Are we seeing a bursting bubble in tech? And half the show or more is going to be about like Jerry Seinfeld and.
It's my fault. I steered. We can go back on topic here. I was just going to say that. I mean, my late Jewish mother, the last election night, completely disowned me when I told her I voted Libertarian. She was like, "So, who'd you vote for?" I said, well, Mom, I voted for the Libertarian
She's
guy.
like, you voted for Gary?
She's like,
for Gary
like,
Johnson?
You're no son of mine.
Aleppo? What's Aleppo?
And my buddy came over. He had the same thing with his Jewish buddy. We were like the two people in Manhattan who voted Libertarian, Anyway.
Yeah. So back to Elon and to Tesla, because we have gotten, and it's okay that we kind of got off track on like facts and figures because we did cover them quite a bit. And I will suggest to the audience to go back to our episode with Charlie from last week. Anyone who hasn't heard that one, who wants more sort of fact-based meat and potato conversations, we did cover that a lot, and Charlie's been covering this stuff. But to bring it back to the seriousness of this issue, we talked a little bit about these sort of questions of integrity. Jim Chanos who's no joke, a very serious short seller who had shorted Tesla. He's probably shorting Tesla. I don't know what his position is or if he's publicly said. Has he?
He has said he's short.
He said he's
Tesla.
short.
I know him a little bit peripherally.
He's an interesting guy.
Very smart guy. Great guy. Good sense of humor also. Even, and he's definitely short Tesla.
Yeah. And he's compared it to Enron. He's openly compared to Enron. He talks about how he a couple of years ago, either a couple of years ago he started to put this list together or recently, but he was...
The executive departure list.
The executive departure.
I actually post that on Twitter, and he has one of his analysts put that together, and I put it up there. So, yeah.
So he pulled that data from you initially? Is that...
Well, no. He gets it from all over, and then he's not on Twitter. He was on Twitter for a while, and he's not on Twitter anymore.
He doesn't seem like a tweeter, you know what I mean? He shouldn't be on Twitter.
Well, he's not.
He's too reserved, too quiet.
He's actually a dryly funny guy. But at any rate, so
he's scary thoughtful. I've met Jim, and I had lunch with him once at a table, me, him, and a few other people, and I would describe him as scary thoughtful. That's how I would describe him. I remember sitting there and be like, this guy is having a tremendous amount of brain activity, which I'm not registering because of his facial expressions and his body language.
He's got a great memory for detail.
Yeah.
For something
sure.
a company said.
Very true.
And then they'll contradict it 18 months later, and he'll be like, wait a second. I seem to remember this, and then he'll pull it right up, and he's terrific.
Yeah. He talked about the dark turn and the purchase of Solar City. We talked about that in last week. Absolutely very scary thing, not in accordance with sort of typical sort of
it was complete
corporate governance.
It was total self-dealing,
right.
And now there's a lawsuit that's been allowed to go forward on that. Yeah, what you started referring to with Chanos is he maintains that executive departure list, which is just massive. Another guy left today, literally today. By the way, last month, 2 of the top 3 financial people left within a week of each other. That is never good. Okay, the CFO, who was brought in to replace the original CFO, lasted, I think, a year. And this guy Wheeler, and he left, and they brought back the original.
No, these
CFO.
are horrific. These are horrible signs, which I mentioned last week in my conversation with Charlie, and I asked him, why does your opinion, Charlie, and I said, why does your opinion not reflected in the stock price, right? Now, of course, I know that part of the process of making money in markets being right before everyone else sees that you're right. So I understand that. But again, this is such an egregious case looking at it, right? It is not a normal bearish case against a stock that's doing abnormally well. Given where its debt is trading, to me, it defies...
So basically, you've got a fairly restricted float in the stock. Okay, Musk himself owns over 20% of the company, and then you've got a handful of mutual funds. Bailey Gifford, which is a Scottish firm, Fidelity, which has been selling, but I think they're still the largest outside shareholder, or close to it. T. Rowe Price, which added shares last quarter. Those 3, together have a huge amount of the stock.
Do we know what percentage they own?
Yeah, we do know. It's all public. I forget offhand. I don't know, maybe 30% among the 3 of them, something like that in total.
Well, Elon owns like 20%, doesn't he?
What's that?
Doesn't Elon own like 20%?
Right, he owns over 20, so that's half the float there. And, then you've got other mutual funds with big chunks. Now, I've seen all 3 of the portfolio managers who control this stock at those 3 mutual funds interviewed, and they just talk in vague terms about Tesla's going to dominate this and Elon Musk is that. I would love to sit down with one of those guys across from the table and say, okay, they're going to dominate. Well, why don't you explain to me why it's better for them to wire together 7,000 little batteries that they buy from Panasonic than the whole rest of the industry moving to prismatic, batteries that are larger and you only have to wire together a few hundred of them. I think the guy's jaw would drop open. These people have done no homework on the company.
So as
far as I can tell, they haven't. Because I've never seen Because there is no specific case for this. It's a religion. I learned a long time ago not to argue. I said I'm Jewish, but I'm totally agnostic, okay? I'm really agnostic. I don't say I'm atheist just in case I'm wrong, so I'm agnostic.
You can only take so much shit from your mother.
But, well...
You already voted for Gary Johnson.
Well, she was more than agnostic. No, we never argued about that. No, but my point is that you can't argue religion with people. They just believe, and they don't want to hear anything that contradicts that. But, here's the difference. The difference between... Tesla and other stuff is Tesla, just to keep the lights turned on and spend the CapEx that they say they're going to spend, is consuming, like $4 or $5 billion a year in negative free cash flow. So it's one thing, for some schmuck to say, oh, I love Elon Musk, it's got to save. It's another thing for that schmuck to keep opening his wallet and pouring more of his own personal money into the company. So where is that money coming?
Like we've seen in the last few days with the stock getting hammered and then buying that dip. Who is buying the stock at those levels? Is it just traders who are taking advantage of the momentum in the stock or sort of using technicals to trade it and looking to make short-term profits? Or are there actually people buying the dip in this stock?
Well, we don't know at this point. We'll see the new institutional holdings, 6 weeks after the quarter ends. But my guess is a lot of Tesla trading is computer momentum stuff. Momentum on the way up, momentum on the way down. Now, the fundamentals are so hard for this company that recently we got in a lot of what I call tourist shorts. In other words, people who haven't been short this thing and know it the way I do, but they're like, oh, this is really bad. I think I'll short some. And it's pretty easy to spook those guys out. So today they put out the release about the production in Q1 and deliveries, and it was terrible. They missed everything. But for whatever reason, people seized on Musk saying and undoubtedly lying that they don't have to raise capital for the rest of this year. And that gets the stock going. And then a few shorts get scared, and then they cover, and then more shorts get scared. And then computers, I think, sense this, the algos, and they're like, oh, there's a lot of shorts here. They're getting scared. Let's spike it up more. I think that's kind of...
It's a really good point.
I think that's what happens.
There's a lot of short covering.
And then you've got, quote-unquote bargain hunters, right? The stock was $380 at one point, and it was down to the high 240s the other morning. People are like, oh, it must be cheap in the high 240s. They're not paying attention to the fact that, there's like whatever it is at that price, a $50 billion enterprise value or something on this thing, and they're consuming billions of dollars a year. So I think there's some of that too,
Well, Elon knows better than anyone else. The one thing he certainly knows is that gravity is real. And you can't fight it. Mark, I really enjoyed having you on the program. This was a lot of fun. We didn't get into too many sort of specific details, but I think that was all right because we got into those last week. And
all you have to remember is massive competition coming from companies that know how to build cars. It's better technology than Tesla's. They can cross-subsidize those cars by their profits from their traditional cars and SUVs. And here in the U.S., Tesla later this year is going to lose the $7,500 per car tax credit while all these new competing cars are going to have it. So not only are many of these cars priced cheaper than Tesla's to begin with, they're going to have an extra $7,500 Tesla's going to lose. They had their window. All they did was lose more and more money during that window, and now the window is getting slammed shut on them. And Tesla is not a business. It's a cash-burning Musk vanity project.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think, if you had to say, because I have my sort of sense of this, but if you had to say, like, what the story is, like, when we look back, let's say things sort of progress the way you imagine them or in a number of different ways that you have imagined, what will the story be of Tesla?
I'll tell you. Well, besides
I already got this ready. It's canned material.
Besides everything we talked about, there's one other point I should make, and this ties into that point.
Right.
Because, when you talk to a Tesla lemming, the first thing they say to your fax is, but have you driven the car? Okay. Many, many people are confusing EV love, an electric vehicle drivetrain with the instant torque and the quiet and that stuff. Many people are confusing Tesla love for EV love.
Right, EV.
And all these people are saying, oh, I'll never go back to my other car. I love my Tesla too much. You put those people in the Jaguar, the Mercedes, the Audi, or the Porsche with the electric drivetrain and, a Jaguar, Audi, and Mercedes and Porsche level of interior quality and reliability and dealership convenience, they will throw that Tesla in the garbage where it belongs because they'll be able to enjoy whatever they liked about the Tesla with none of the sacrifices you have to make in terms of the company itself.
Well, in that sense, I think Elon has accomplished the goal that he stated early on was sort of his goal. You know, it's interesting you say that because I'd watched him on a piece in 60 Minutes, and he talked about this with SpaceX. And I saw another interview, and it may have been at South by Southwest, where he said the same thing. It probably wasn't at South by Southwest because that would have been.
You mean to encourage the world to go on trust?
His point being that, like, which is a crazy thing to say as the CEO of a company, I would never want to invest in a company with a CEO. Right. But, you know, look, he has done that. That's exactly what he's done.
That's fine. We're very compatible. If he's happy with Tesla going out of business because everybody else builds better,
he says he is. He's not going to be happy.
Of course, he's not.
Yeah. He's not going to be happy about that. But
he's going to have to swap the G650 for a G250 or a propeller plane.
I have driven a Tesla, and it's fucking amazing car.
And you know what?
I love driving
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my point is, I loved driving it, and I'm going to love driving the next sort of fleet of electric high-performance vehicles that are going to come down the line.
By the way, there are multiple hedge fund managers who own Teslas and are short the stock.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Why not? Sure.
Right. Yeah.
You could own a DeLorean and be short it. Right? I don't know how many people.
Well, that was never public.
It was a much bigger disaster.
Yeah.
But I think, the story, Mark, will be...
Actually, Tesla's a bigger disaster. I mean,
because there's more money.
Yeah, Tesla's destroying far more capital than John DeLorean did.
Except we don't know about any Coke deals that John...
Musk is an Ambien man. He said that. If we catch him with a suitcase, it's not going to be Coke, it's going to be Ambien.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Ambien's the worst to take for sleep.
I've never had it.
It's horrific. Do you sleep well?
I sleep very well.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's because your short Tesla is right now.
When it was spiking, all right, I'll admit, I would get up at 4 a.m. to check the price when it opened, and then I'd go back to sleep. But I sleep better now.
So I just want to say this. I think the story for me, the reason why I find this story interesting is because it is at the intersection of a number of these forces that we've covered on the show, one of which is the chronically low interest rates and the cheap financing, the wealth gap that's grown, that's made a lot of this funding additionally available. We've seen that also in the case of Uber, where Uber's investors are financing the subsidizing of my rides in an Uber. But it's also, I think, interesting as a bit because of Elon, right? Because you've got this really captivating figure who's shooting rockets into space, walking around with a flight jacket, who's sort of investing at the frontier of technological innovation insofar as the public sort of imagines it's obviously not. Obviously, it's not. We agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
That is not the frontier of public innovation. But these are things that the public can sort of conceptualize. They can wrap their heads around. Electric cars, hyperloops, electric planes, tunneling. You create a boring company.
I'm telling you, all this shit was on the cover of Pop Sci in the 70s.
Listen. I mean, and so I think when we look back, he's going to be a seminal figure that I'm not going to say this 100%. It's one possibility, right? You could see how 10, 20 years from now, maybe not 20, but 10 certainly, will look back and Elon will have been the face or one of the faces of the boom and the bust.
No question.
Right?
No question.
And it shows sort of the willingness of people to believe in a story above the facts that are staring them in the face.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. It's a religion.
Mark, you got me excited having you on, man. I feel like I interrupted way too much, but it was such an engaging conversation.
I think we can keep going here.
You're
this was
super
a lot of
polite.
fun. I really enjoyed
You're
this.
more polite than I expected. I was ready for combat here.
No,
Mark, so great having you on, man. I know the audience is going to really appreciate and enjoy this, except for the ones who own Tesla stock and who will never listen to me again. I hope that's not true.
You know what?
Don't hate me.
If they're listening to this on United Airlines, they're going to have to spring for $10 for the.
It's pretty cool that we're on United Airlines, isn't it? The audience may not everyone in the audience may know that this show is on United Airlines.
Yeah, what's the I'm blanking out.
International flights.
No, when you get the internet on the plane.
Bongo?
No, that's in the airport. Go, whatever. They're gonna have to spring for that and dump their Tesla because that's what's gonna happen.
What do you mean? What does that have to do with our show? You don't have to be on Go to listen to our show.
No, but if they're on a plane listening to the show.
Oh, if they're on a plane listening to the show,
they're gonna have to get an internet connection, log into their broker. Hopefully, after hearing this, save your money, people. Seriously.
No, didn't we say this is not financial advice? Not financial advice.
You're right. I'm not giving financial advice. You want to wind up having to fly coach the rest of your lives, then
do you hear that, audience?
Tesla.
You guys don't. A lot of you in the audience do not know this. We are on United Airlines, all international flights. Correction, actually, let me make this clear. I think all international flights use the wide-bodied aircraft. Certainly some non-international flights do. Like if you go to Hawaii, you're on a wide-bodied aircraft. You can listen to Hidden Forces, and that's because this is an amazing show. And it's an amazing show, and I know how many listeners I have, and I think we only have like 64 reviews on iTunes. Guys, this is unacceptable. I never make a stink about iTunes, but I'm going to make it now because I have the appropriate person on the show to make that. So I would love and appreciate one of you to go and click that 5-star button on iTunes.
I'm going to do it as soon as we
Mark's
get
gonna
off.
Even Mark's going to do it. All right, Mark, great, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And that was my episode with Mark Spiegel. I want to thank Mark for being on the program. Today's episode was produced by me and edited by Chanos. For more episodes, you can check out our website at hiddenforcespod.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Forces Pod, or send me an email at dk@hiddenforcespod.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.